As I sat on the train, watching the picturesque landscape of south of France glide by the window, a very peculiar man sat across from me. With his safari hat and characteristic clothing, he stood out with great presence and air of mystery. Seeing me seated with my large backpack in front of him, he asked where I was heading. Talking with him, I could appreciate that he was an extraordinary man, kind, serene, spiritual, his energy clean and warm. I briefly shared my travel plan with him, just as I told Carlos a few days earlier.
If you need recommendations for India, I can give you some. I spend some time there almost every year.
This surprised me. Really? What do you do every year in India? Do you have business there?
No, not business.
He said, laughing.
I like to go to India every year to disconnect.
For a moment, he seemed to hesitate about telling me more. Finally, he continued.
Have you heard of ashrams?
No, sir, what is that?
An ashram is like a sanctuary, a place for a spiritual retreat. India is a very spiritual country, you know? Few countries still maintain that connection. I escape there for a few weeks every year to meditate. If this interests you, I recommend visiting Punjab. It's a region in India. But tell me, do you already know why you're traveling?
I thought about the reflections I had had about this since the start of my trip. I'm not quite sure yet. I suppose that at this moment it was the only thing that I was sure I wanted to do, I answered. For some reason, this gentleman inspired a strange feeling of trust and understanding in me that invited me to be frank. So, I took a breath and continued speaking, trying to express my feelings. I just graduated, and I can't help but feel that so far in my life, everything has been somehow decided by someone or something, without stopping to think about what I really wanted for myself. That I had to study until high school was taken for granted. In the same way, it was nothing less than obvious that I had to pursue a degree. I chose aeronautical engineering almost without thinking, perhaps because of its roots already in the family or my interest in space and airplanes, or of course because I have always been good with numbers. But sometimes I wonder if it really was what I wanted to study. You could say yes, but you could also say no. I don't know, in my heart, there has always been much more than mathematics and physics. Unanswered questions, feelings of longing, a desire of adventure. The world has always invited me to suppress all that, to follow the pre-established path without wondering why, without paying attention to my crazy emotions, to be just another one, without pretending to be different. My life has therefore been very simple until now. Every day I studied to get good grades. After studies or on vacations, I took refuge and lost myself in the imaginary worlds of adventure and fantasy, in video games or books. An easy life to lead. Even happy, I could say. However, I feel that now society tells me that I have to stop being a child, that I have to stop being happy, and that I have to worry about earning money, living my life in an office, designing airplanes, knowing everything about the rules that govern their use and manufacture, and that I have no choice in the matter. And then, just another worker. It came like a flashback, that phrase my dentist had said a year earlier while doing a checkup, when she asked me how my studies were going. Despite his joking tone, it had chilled my blood that day, because I knew that deep down it was not joke at all. I did not want to be just another worker. In fact, it was the last thing I wanted. To become one more of all those zombies that I saw on my way to university, stuck in their cars on traffic or packing themselves in public transport every morning, with inert and sad faces, on their way to completely waste another day in their lives doing something they hate. That terrified me. The words of my dentist resonated once more in my mind inside that train car. A shiver ran through my body. Just another worker. I wasn't ready to accept all that, I finally concluded. Something inside me said I had to rebel, that life has to be more than working and dreaming about things that will never come. I guess, in the end, I'm running away, while trying to find a solution to this, and an answer to my dilemmas.
I understand your confusion, son.
said the gentleman after a thoughtful pause.
I think you're doing the right thing. If I might give you just one piece of advice for your trip, it's this. Just 3 words. I don't know.
He ended enigmatically.
Good luck with your trip. I have the feeling it's gonna be full of important experiences.
The train arrived at its destination at the Montpellier station. I thanked him for the advice and our paths separated. I don't know. I think I understood what this man wanted to say with that. Something like my trip should be one of absorption and learning rather than arrogance or presumption. But why was I traveling? What was I seeking to learn? As I waited for my next train sitting at the station, I pondered this question that the gentleman had awakened in me. Perhaps the main reason was that I had an irrepressible urge to live. As I had told that man, with the freedom that graduation as an engineer brought, I had felt the urgency to make a radical change, to leave the books and screen aside, to put the essentials in a backpack and go off to live real adventures, not virtual ones. However, I did not want to think that my trip was just one of pleasure, but rather I had decided to take it as a challenge. It was answers I was looking for. I wanted to know how far I was capable of venturing outside my comfort zone. And not just geographically, I was willing to explore the limits of what I was capable of doing, of seeing, of feeling, of thinking, of living. That alone, no doubt, should inspire answers and unforgettable moments. Yet, I was also traveling to know and understand the world a bit better, through its people and its places I was about to visit. To put everything in perspective, and with that achieve deeper values and wisdom. Lastly, my trip could also be described as a spiritual pilgrimage, a search for inspiration about what next step to take in my life after graduation. The search for a conviction, a motivation, a reason to fight, or for which it was worth dedicating my efforts. The search for my mission in life. However, besides these disparate and improvised reasons, I was not entirely clear about why I was traveling, or what I was looking for, or where I wanted to get to. At that moment, it was more a feeling that guided me, a feeling that had become too strong to continue ignoring. Something inside me told me that it was not comfort and relaxation that I needed, but rather adventure. I wrote these conclusions in my journal. In the end, I added a reminder that said, "It's not a vacation, but a search. I don't interact with people to talk and have a good time, although it can be, but to learn from them. And I don't travel to judge, but to understand. Thus, every person I meet on this trip will be my teacher, but I will not be anyone's teacher because I am a pilgrim. A pilgrim walks to discover and to learn, and this I must not forget." After another train ride absorbed in these thoughts, suddenly a crazy idea came to my mind. Traveling by train was fine, I loved it, but if it was challenge I was looking for, and I was really willing to explore the limits, why not try one of the most adventurous ways of traveling? Hitchhiking. Inspired and decided, I got off the train at the next station, in a small French village near the coast, and walked for a while until I reached one of the exits of the village. I stopped by the side of the road. The time had come to do what I had seen so many times in movies and travel articles. The time had come for my backpacking baptism. I left my backpack at my feet by the side of the road and, without thinking twice, and with my heart pounding, I extended my arm with my thumb up in that endearing and ancient symbol of freedom, spontaneity, and adventure. For quite a while, many cars passed without stopping. All the drivers noticed my presence. They looked at me. It felt weird, a sensation I was not yet accustomed to. After about half an hour, however, it finally happened. A car stopped a little ahead of where I was standing. 3 young guys, my age, were inside the vehicle. As soon as the car took off with me inside, a great sensation overwhelmed me. I had made it. I had gotten into the car of a stranger who had offered to take me altruistically, just because I had raised my arm asking for it. It was an incredible, beautiful feeling. People helping other people without expecting anything in return. They dropped me off near the next city, where I finally arrived in the car of another young French couple. Before I had time to react, and as the couple's car was driving away, I realized that they had left me practically in the middle of the highway, at a junction between several highways. Suddenly, the reality of the situation I suddenly found myself in struck me. I had the feeling that I had crossed the line. I was doing something that was probably prohibited, something worthy of being a scene from an adventure movie. I was walking on the shoulder of a highway in the middle of nowhere, well on the outskirts of the city, with a 20-kilo backpack on my back and a stream of cars passing at 120 kilometers per hour by my side, which I was trying to stop with a finger and a look. And I had never felt so alive. It was clear at that moment that I was born for that, for adventure. A young guy stopped almost skidding on the shoulder of the highway to get me out of there. This is exactly what I was looking for, even without consciously knowing that I was looking for it. This is what connects with my spirit, I kept thinking as the guy dropped me off at the entrance of a small village on the banks of the Rhine. Adventure, spontaneity, not having any idea when I got up in the morning where I was going to sleep at the end of that day, nor what extraordinary things were going to happen to me or I could see. The feeling carried me strongly, while I already stuck the guy ropes of my small tent on the top of a narrow hill, on the outskirts of the village. From there, an incredible panoramic view encompassed the entire expanse of the river and the world around me. I watched the setting sun, absorbed, and prepared for one of the best nights of my life, alone on that hill, surrounded by nature, stars, and adventure. The landscape was more beautiful than I could ever have imagined finding on this trip, and the trip had just begun. The natural landscape, the large expanses, are always much more beautiful in reality than when you see them in a photo or on television, because in reality, they surround you completely. They absorb you inside them and make you feel tiny in comparison, I wrote in my travel journal. They invade you with fresh, clean air in your lungs, with silence and peace in your soul. I closed the journal and put it back in the backpack. I lost my gaze in the horizon. This promises to be the adventure of my life, I thought as I watched the most splendid sunset. This is why I travel.